Okay, so let's start it off with Bitcoin. As always, we have a big catalyst this week with the FOMC meeting on Wednesday. That is very likely going to produce a major move within this market outside of our current daily range. Daily range, of course, still with the same lows that we do see in this blue box right here between about, basically your low $37,000 region. And to the upside, we got our highs coming in right around about 41,500 or so, if you do want to be exact. With that in mind, the short-term timeframes in between then is probably going to be, a little bit of a wild card here. Although short-term, I do want to state that we have a few things that do suggest that Bitcoin can very easily get a leg up here. I want to be deliberately clear before we get into this one because while I am going to talk about potential upside targets from here, the overall higher term time frame analysis is still very much the same. If you did watch Saturday or Sunday's video, essentially all of that, plus actually a little bit more as we got the weekly closure officially for spot price action, has actually increased at least my look towards the downside. But in between there, can we get a rally up anywhere to $40,000 to $41,000? Definitely possible. However, I wouldn't necessarily just blindly call that. But for right now, it should be known that on the daily right here, we do have a potential third drive of bullish divergence being formed. That'll be confirmed with the daily closure, especially anywhere here or higher. Preferably, I'd like to see it specifically above about $39,000. But technically speaking, if it is anywhere here or higher, that will populate, and we will very likely see an extension somewhere up around $40,000 and test that 21x benchmark average. Again, that doesn't really change anything on the higher term timeframes, but that is, a decent sized move from here. Obviously, I'm getting to recording this video a little bit later, but because we could have called this one out when price action was obviously a lot lower, but in this case, time is what it is. On top of that, we should also denote that over here on our stochastic momentum chart, we will notice that on the daily, stochastic momentum will actually turn back up with any sort of a closure today above 38,650 or so. So if Bitcoin does essentially close above basically where we're at right now, not only will we have 3 drives of bullish divergence, but also stochastic momentum also headed up right here, very likely does take another leg up somewhere between about $40,000 to $41,000, kind of where I'd be looking for. Why is that? Because that is essentially, if I get rid of this area right here, because that is not relevant towards what I'm talking about, but if we look at a fib from the overall range, that would be essentially between the 0.5 and the 618. We do see the daily 21, or sorry, not the daily 21, but the daily 55 coming in down around about 41.5 or so right now. So anywhere in this blue box would be fair game right here. I feel like I had a chart on this one earlier though, but yeah, whatever. Somewhere around there is where I'd be looking for if Bitcoin were to initiate that move. Again, long term though, I still have my reservations about, any sort of reversal from this region. I do think that the long term still has significant downside risk, but the targets alongside that is where I could come into maybe a little bit of hopium, because as it is right now, if we go reference the fear and greed index, the market's definitely on the fearful side, as you would imagine. And realistically, at least from what I've gathered on social media venues, it really does feel like most people are looking down. Again, that could just be my sort of echo chamber. So again, let me know if you're kind of noticing the same things, but from the people that I've spoken to, they kind of notice the same things as well. And to me, that gives one of two indications: either Bitcoin front runs, any sort of major downside targets, or it absolutely fucking has a nuclear explosion well below. So what I'm looking at right now, or what I think a lot of these, the big downside targets, at least that I see other people putting out, which are not my downside targets actually, would be about $15,000 to $20,000, kind of what I see rather regularly. So I think that that's actually rather unlikely. I think that if Bitcoin's gonna have a major move down, probably still somewhere around about 25, and if it were to have the nuclear explosion, then probably not even worth talking about at that point. Anyways, let's go through the lower term timeframes a little bit more right here and kind of build out this case for a potential short term continuation based upon specifically that daily closure that we analysized earlier. For the 6 hour right here on CME, which as always I use CME for Monday and Tuesday specifically because it does have better results for its just general signals. We actually do see 6 hour stochastic momentum still pointed to the downside below about 39.6. That is massively contrary to what we do see on spot price action right here with upside momentum above 37.5. What does it essentially equate to? Very likely a range for these next few days here between about 37.5 and basically that $40,000 number is kind of where I'm looking at. But I'll go back on over here and go to the 4 hour, of which we do see the 4 hour will turn up today, or sorry, not today, but upon closure above 39,250 or so, which is certainly within striking distance. So do keep an eye on that number. 3 hours also going to be showing upside above 38.5, and hourly is going to be showing It's going to be showing a loading screen. Is also going to be vertical above about 38.5 as well. So I do like that for essentially, probably a little bit more short-term continuation right here. That does play into one of the other points of hopium that I do have, which is Dixie, of course. Or actually, let me just pull up this chart right here, which Dixie has hit the long-term macro target, like actually exceeded mine before a bit of a pullback all the way up to almost 104 right here. Again, a long-term region, typically speaking, it's going to grind this area out and then very likely pull back. Pullbacks can very easily happen towards about 100 to 101 and not really do anything. I am long-term macro bullish on this, looking for continuation in the next few years to come towards like 110, maybe even 120, as long as Dixie is above about $97. Until then, short term, do we see a pullback from here? I mean, honestly, on the short term, if we go to a daily, it's actually not really given any indication that it's doing that just yet, but I do suspect that it gives at least one more try up, probably gets rejected there. In this case, I do want to see daily BBWP get below that moving average before I do look for that contraction phase. I always avoid using shorter term timeframes, but to be fair, for what it's worth on the short term timeframes, it actually is suggesting at least one more drive up towards our current highs. And if I could get rid of this, that'd be great, which is, basically that 103.8 region. So very likely another move up around there. And then we probably see resolution on this around Wednesday when the FOMC meets. On top of that, what else should I get into? So we spoke about that. We spoke about potential targets. And now I want to, we actually have plenty of time right here. Let me turn down the volume for a second here. And let's get into perhaps the long term as to why I'm not really, why I don't really think that this is all that meaningful, to be quite frank with you. Okay, so first and foremost, higher term timeframes. We go over here to a 5-day or a weekly. Both of them are pretty much the same chart right now. Bitcoin long-term bearish as long as we are specifically below about $44,000. Why is $44,000 a big number right here? Or sorry, $42,000, a big number right here. It's due to this chart, among other charts as well, which is the monthly MACD chart that I've been bringing out. A very simplistic chart. We can obviously make this a lot more complicated, but I think it's going to do it for today at least. And why am I specifically picking out about $41,500 to $42,000? That's exactly where that white moving average is. That's a 20 simple, and as long as Bitcoin is below it, I am looking for monthly continuation to the downside over the next few months. Doesn't mean it's going to happen today. In fact, today, like I said, probably rallies, or at least a little bit more, with those areas in mind. But if we go and analysize this chart, if you will, we've seen this same signal 3 times in Bitcoin's history, not including this current one. That is the monthly MACD crossing the downside. I've marked them off with the green vertical bars right here, and that plus the PMAR getting below the moving average right here, also pretty damn bad, but we don't need to focus too much on that right now. This will get the job done for this particular explanation. And then when we do go over into the chart, once that green bar happens, again with the monthly MACD crossing the downside, it is then the monthly getting a full-on closure below that white moving average, the 20 simple, that does catalyze the next major meltdown, typically, or not typically, but each and every time in Bitcoin's history. Doesn't mean it's always going to happen like that, but probability is rather high, at least for what we have right now, to the green 55 exponential moving average, which is much lower than price action right now. And as you can see over here, boom, closes, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 months, finds its lows, spends, about half a year grinding out those lows, but, that was the low if you were patient, which I am not. Anyways, going on into 2018, same thing over here, right? Monthly MACD crossing the downside, represented by that green vertical bar. Bitcoin closes ever so slightly below the white 20 simple right there. And then the next couple months, Bitcoin finds its lows again on the 55. Same thing over here. A little bit of a nuance on this one. However, in January of 2020, we get the monthly MACD crossing the downside. That was 2 months before the Rona dump, the old flu dump right there. And then, it closed below the 20 simple, but it also hit the 55 and even wicked well below there, all on the same drive. Again, a bit of a, black swan, if you will. So, kind of a difference on that iteration, but still same sort of idea with finding its lows on extreme volatility towards that region. Anyways, for what it's worth right now, as long as Bitcoin is below specifically that white moving average, which is currently 41.5 actually, I do look at any sort of a rally towards that region as, very likely the next lower high before continuation to the downside, and probably sucking up people into bullishness when the higher term timeframes say that that is not the right thing to be doing right now. That would also imply that any sort of a closure on the next month, this month of May coming into June, above that region, and we could probably start to talk about mega macro bull traps not bull traps, bear traps, with targets back up towards $58,000 to $62,000. Until that happens, though, again, the downside does have higher probabilities. Alongside, of course, if we reference monthly stochastic momentum over here, this one also closed with more downside momentum. We'll be remaining with with that as long as Bitcoin's below 55,300. And of course, if we do bring up this godforsaken chart over here as well, by the way, should reference before I get into that, the green 55 is down around about $25,000. That's where I'm getting that sort of macro potential target if Bitcoin does get major moves to the downside. Again, very likely to see bounces along the way. Basically 37, kind of we're already, spending our time around there. Obviously 34 to 30, basically 34 to 33. And then of course we got 29 to 30 or so. But the other big chart that I want to bring out that has also had a bit of a new thing to be speaking about right here is of course the 5-day chart. The 5-day chart, which have gone over a million goddamn times, is doing what? Well, we are seeing, oh, god damn it, this 5-day volatility expansion is still kind of trudging its way along. I still want to see a full-on closure, not just above the moving average, but with both the moving average and the BBWP having a positive slope. For right now, it's not so. However, we have like another 3 days until closure, so it's not super relevant right now. I suspect that is probably going to rise up very likely once we get that FOMC meeting on Wednesday, which I believe is also around closure as well. Anyways, for the last couple of years, anytime that we have seen 5-day BBWP measuring volatility, the dispersion of returns down around the teens and percentiles, the expansion phase from that has led on to an average move of about 45% for about, on average, about just over 40 days to the upside or the downside from that expansion point. Again, we actually haven't seen the expansion point just yet. We're going to have our first chance right here on this next closure to see that. I want to see both of them have a positive slope, and then, very likely looking at explosive move in the next 5 to 10 days if that gets confirmed. And the reason why I'm biased towards the downside based off of this chart is because the 5-day stochastic momentum oscillator has gone the correct direction alongside that first major move off of volatility expansion perfectly for the past couple of years. Again, doesn't mean it's always gonna be like that, and we can even back test it further than that, which I can assure you it has pretty good results still. But ultimately, we can forecast what sort of price action would need to close on that next 5-day in order to force the 5-day stochastic momentum oscillator back onto the upside, and that would be 44,250. Again, 44,250. So as long as Bitcoin's below there, again, pressure to the downside, I would just even go as far to say 41,500 if you just want a nice, nice number to kind of be looking for. Until then, rallies up to that region, definitely fine. Short-term timeframes do suggest, maybe some more continuation here could very easily happen, but ultimately, as long as this is downside angled, I will continue to favor the long-term downside just off of statistics and probabilistic standpoint. Anyways, on top of that, obviously on the weekly, sorry, we did not talk about this on the weekly. The weekly as well is getting its first cross to the downside on stochastic momentum for the first time basically since the highs in November, which not so great. And that will also be remaining with downside pressure as long as Bitcoin's below 44,200. I think it's also the same thing on CME. Basically 44,000 in this case. Both crossing down though, and that is what is important right here. So again, if Bitcoin does get a nice rally this week, especially early this week, I do expect them to be arrested somewhere around 40 to 41.5. If Bitcoin starts to close above 41.5 on a daily, well, not only do you have that monthly level come to play, but you also have the 0.5 and of course those prior range highs. That would be a good indication that, this market actually or very possibly could put in a major macro bear trap right here. I think it's very unlikely, personally speaking, but that would be the criteria I'd be looking for within that case. Until then, short-term timeframes are showing, potential continuation right here. 12-hour, I believe, has already confirmed its third drive of bullish divergence. So in this case, you already hit the easy target on that one. The next one would be basically just above $40,000 actually. So I do think that this, these first few days of this new week probably do trade up here, and then FOMC is where you get the real direction on the market. Anyways, I'll leave it on that note. I forgot to shill Bybit alongside my Instagram. Bybit, blah, 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 blah. They got $3,000 to $4,000 deposit bonus. Be aware that most people are going to lose their money trading, so you probably shouldn't do it unless you actually have a working strategy, which you can do without actually risking money by backtesting, which I'll put in a video sometime this week. So hopefully that was helpful, and there you go for Bitcoin, sirs and zers.